Hello, this is Brian Foster on Kardec Radio, presenting the program Spiritism and the Spirit World Around Us. Hello, this is Brian Foster. Tonight we have an exciting program. I have completed my series of 3 books, all from writings and messages from the spirit world to the Reverend Vale Owen, Heaven and Below. This is book 1. I have book 2 and book 3. I put them all out at approximately the same time because I categorized everything that was written by the Reverend Vale Owen from different spirits in order to fully expand to you what the spirit world gave to Reverend Vale Owen. And it was multiple spirits. And in summary, heaven is real. Heaven is actionable. In many religions, in Catholicism and Christianity, different sects and so forth, we get, these fuzzy things, of this is what heaven could be. And we have a very imperfect idea. Now, I'm not going to say I'm going to give you a perfect idea, but I'm going to give you more information. And it's not me. It's all from the writings by Spiritist mediums, Allan Kardec, Chico Xavier, Yvonne Pereira, but the Reverend Vale Owen, I believe, gave you another whole set of information above and beyond what has been done by many Spiritist authors. So, let me repeat. So the series of books I have written, analyzing and expanding the communication from various groups of spirits to the Reverend Vale Owen, are for the express purpose of explaining the reality, the organization, the process, the environment, and the progression of spirits, the work, the daily life of heaven and the realms below, to provide for those interested in an understanding of why we are on earth in our present physical form, and what is waiting for us when our dense shell is cast off and we return to the real world, the spirit world. The books by the Reverend Vale Owen certainly stand on their own, and I recommend anyone interested in further research to read his books. I suggest starting with Beyond the Veil, a compilation of 4 books. And Vale Owen presented a rich commentary from spirits, starting from his own mother to spirits who had roamed the highest levels of heaven around the earth to the depths of purgatory. And the information provided is revelatory, amazing, and somewhat disconcerting. Our status of independent life form, living a life shaped by random events and beginning and ending on earth, is completely altered by what was exposed in his books. It was to add weight to the view of the spirit realm presented in Vale Owen's books that I thought writing my own series of books about his was warranted. The core reason is that all of his spirited writing, the word Spiritism, was never uttered. The word spirituality and spiritualism were used, but the tying back of the communication from the other side to the doctrine of Spiritism was not expressly made. In the entire set of books, nothing said in the thousands of words brought to him from the spirit realm stood in disagreement with the doctrine of Spiritism. In fact, they expanded it. Explanation and glimpses into levels of heaven and its processes were all additive. The spirit world was more fully painted as a real working environment. And I firmly believe that Vale Owen was a spiritist in belief, even though he didn't label himself as one. In the era he lived, with the active pushback from organized religions to the concept of individual spirituality, reincarnation, and karma, may have made a better choice to not make a stand on the doctrine of Spiritism, or he wasn't aware of the books by Allan Kardec and Leon Denis during the time when the original fervor of Spiritism, spread by the French, had somewhat dimmed and was mainly being revived in the distant shores of Brazil. In Spiritist literature published in Brazil in Portuguese, his name is mentioned. In fact, seeing his name in print alongside the list of Spanish and Portuguese sounding names who were gathered in the spirit world to help promote Spiritism on earth is what first brought his name to my attention. I'd never heard of him before. From the first peek at an incongruent name on the list, I found his books and started my discovery. In 2016, in a meeting of mediums in the Spiritist Center in Rio de Janeiro, My wife and I were told that a spirit would be helping us who was a European. He had tried to spread Spiritist concepts to America during his physical life, and he was now part of a team of spirits who would help the effort to bring the doctrine of Spiritism to North America. Subsequent communications have solidified my belief that G. Vale Owen is amongst us, assisting this great effort to bring knowledge to the English-speaking world about the third revelation, Spiritism. Since his series of books, which were published in the earliest 20th century, more than 450 books have been published beginning in the middle to the late 20th century by the great Brazilian Spiritist Francisco, also called Chico C. Xavier, all exposing and explaining more about the other side. Other Spiritist authors as well have played an important role, and they've psychographed, which is writing down, it could be automatic writing, or it could be writing when they give you intuition or messages to your brain and you write down what the spirit is telling you. They presented a wealth of information about the unseen spheres around the earth, and the vast majority of these have been in Portuguese, and only a fraction have been actually translated yet in English. And yet the information contained in the messages to G. Vale Owen is still pertinent in that they explore territory and concepts not heretofore mentioned. Hence, I have taken each message or group of messages, compared it to other spiritual literature, and attempted to explain what it means to us here on earth. Excuse me. Earth, where each of us believes at times that we are alone and cast off from friends, society, and God. But believe me, nothing could be further from the truth. So how have I organized this book? I've taken the complete set of his works and categorized it according to the following classifications. So the first book, which is Heaven and Below, Book 1 of Spiritism as revealed to an Anglican Vicar, that was G. Vale Owen, covers communication that pertains to three main themes: life in heaven, the lower regions, appearances of Jesus in the spirit realm. Book 2, I have labeled that book Spirits and the Spirit Universe, which is about spirit education in the lower levels of heaven, spirit education in the higher levels of heaven, the attributes of spirits, what powers does a spirit have, the power of spirits, and then knowledge of the universe, basic knowledge of how the universe works. And then book 3, and this is all derived from German Vale. Book 3 is how we are guided by spirits, how they guide humans on earth, what kind of spirit assistance do they have, and what does it tell us about the future of mankind and earth itself. My classifications are not perfect. They overlap at times, cover information that could have been spread to multiple themes, but I hope they suffice to broadly discuss the subject under which they were placed. I've also used the numeric designation of the levels of heaven as originally presented in the books by the Reverend G. Vale Owen. The spirits quite plainly say that they're using this numbering system for convenience only, and that other spirits may use other classifications. As an example, in the book psychographed by Francisco C. Xavier, Chico Xavier, I have not detected the same numbering system, only references to higher or lower spheres. The spirits communicating to G. Vale Owen spoke about levels 1 to 10, with the 11th level as a major dividing line between knowledge and aptitude for a spirit. The 11th level is regarded as a major graduation point, where the act of creation begins. All levels below are involved in the process of learning and readying oneself for being a really contributing member of the spirit society. In each book, I reproduce the introduction and the chapter covering the life of the Reverend G. Vale Owen, and I also reused the glossary and the bibliography. I wanted each book to stand independently. Otherwise, all the content is original in each of the three books. In summary, I have endeavored to gather the available Spiritist literature in English and combine it with thoughts coming from the spirit realm through the Reverend G. Vale Owen to illustrate a small section of the vast spirit universe that awaits each one of us. So let's start. Let's start with life in heaven. So what happens after we die? Do we reside in a cloud-like atmosphere at leisure for all eternity? Am I still me after I die? All questions asked by every human on the planet at one time or another. Communications from high spirits, commencing in the 1850s in answers to a series of questions posed by Allan Kardec, the codifier of Spiritism, begin to shed light on the mystery of what happens after physical death. The answer is somewhat mundane. We are who we were, and this may be disappointing for many, we still work in the spirit plane. Sounds like life, only different. It is. Death is just a rebirth, a metamorphosis, whereby we escape from our dense surroundings and emerge into a changed reality. The real reality, the reality that we dwell in for the vast majority of our immortal existence, is close and is waiting for us to return. Messages sent from the Reverend G. Vale Owen, combined with Spiritist literature from Allan Kardec, Leon Denis, Francisco C. Xavier, Yvonne Pierre, and others, who either psychographed, writing down what a spirit is directing a person to write, or other forms of communication, present a picture, albeit incomplete. Nevertheless, what has been revealed should enable you to think about your life, and your balance between materialism and spiritualism. Knowing what comes after our sojourn on our planet will provide you with a fulcrum with which you can use to lever changes in your life or not, according to your free will. Spiritism undercuts the range of choices we may make. They are less than what many would feel comfortable with an ideal world. Spiritism notifies us that at our present spiritual maturity, we are treated more like an elementary school child. Individual lesson plans are made in advance of our birth. Our free will is mainly composed of our choices we make within a particular lesson, episode, or drama which may occur during our life, and our attitude in surviving and learning from what is presented. To ascend to heaven is wholly within you. There are no rote prayers. There's no dress that you have to wear. There's no selection of foods you may or may not eat. Ascending entails victory over base emotions, over destructive actions, and over selfishness. Learning to love over and show respect and kindness isn't easy in this divided and chaotic world. It isn't meant to be. But as the literature of Spiritism repeats over and over again, each little victory, each small step towards eradicating hurtful behavior is rewarded 100 times any sacrifice made while on earth. So, I want to start with giving you the big picture. And let's start with the Christ sphere. This is hinted at in the book. And various spirits came to the Reverend G. Vale Owen in his years of recording communications from the other side. His mother came first, then other spirits from higher levels than his mother initiate conversation. The spirit names were Castriel, Astriel, Zabdiel, and Arnel. They all agreed on how they would describe the different levels of heaven circling the earth. They were quite explicit in saying that the numbering system was not universal or perfectly accurate, only that it provided a good approximation of the steps of paradise. Arnel, the spirit Arnel, told the Reverend G. Vale Owen, this is what he said: the spheres are constituted both as to content and bounds, as to not be competent of any rigid tabulation in your philosophic habit of thought. If we and others speak of them, we must divide and classify them. However, and this we do for your better understanding, but the method of classification is not of universal acceptance. It is no dogma with us. Yet if you search beneath the outer wording, you will find a certain agreement among those who transmit their messages. And yes, I have. I've seen other books from other spirits, and they talk about higher and lower levels, and I have seen a close, rough approximation of what they're talking about. Some have just 3 levels. Some have multiple levels. But it is, I believe it is within the realm of what I've seen before. So hence, throughout the voluminous messages received by the Reverend G. Vale Owen, the labeling of the levels is consistent. Therefore, level 1 is the beginning stage of heaven. It exists in concept above the lower zone, the umbral, right? They call that the umbral in Portuguese. You'll see that a lot in the books by Francisco C. Xavier. Imagine the earth as a flat circle with a dark abyss, a type of purgatory, below the outline of the earth. So here's the earth, right? In the dark abyss, what many people call like a hell, but it's really a type of purgatory. He says there's no permanent hell. No one's ever permanently assigned to hell for eternity. So you have the dark abyss below the surface of the earth. Then you have the lower zone, which begins at the crust and rising to the first level of heaven. Then think of additional rings around the earth, one above the other. And these are the levels of heaven surrounding the earth. The same occurs for each planet occupied by life. The rings flow outward so far that some planets, the circles practically intersect with other planets as they're rotated around their various suns. For those who incarnate on earth, they shall spend thousands of years climbing up this ladder. First from the possible stage in the dark abyss, to the lower zone, then to the first glorious sight of heaven, as they are incented to learn and educate themselves and modify their character towards love, fraternity, and charity. They shall climb from one level to the next. Within each level, attaining new knowledge and attributes, for moving up a stage doesn't imply additional wisdom. It's not like you're going to college and you just get this little degree. No, but a physical transformation. A spirit becomes less matter and more energy in each graduation. With each new step, a spirit has more tools and resources at their disposal. I talk a lot about that on book 2, Spirit Attributes and Spirit Power. They can travel, they retrieve data, use their will for creation, and access other additional functionality. Like any student on Earth, the more one learns and proves oneself, the more resources and responsibility will be put at their disposal. We are told that the levels 1 through 10 are primarily accumulating knowledge and skills. Concurrent with education and refinement, spirits are involved in other spirits, in helping other spirits, incarnates and discarnates, to evolve, to learn, to follow the light, either by missions to earth, to the lower zone, to the dark abyss, or other levels of heaven. Everyone has work to do. Even if it's administration of heavenly cities, constructing buildings by will, or guarding outposts in the lower zone. The jobs are infinitely more varied than the one can find in our largest metropolises. Above level 10 is where the real work begins. The job of creation starts. Seeding planets, developing different types of plants which conform to the environment of a certain planet, and on and on. Above level 10, you are entering the ranks of the professional. It is as if you have completed your medical residency. You're now ready to actually treat patients without a more experienced doctor at your side. Now, I'm just talking about levels 1 to 10. But these spirits said, okay, we want to talk to you about level 15. And let me tell you what they said. In our enumeration, the sphere 14 are the twofold 7. You see a lot about mathematics from it's like the 144,000, right? Groups of 12 and all that. Because basically the spirit world is all mathematics. Is the highest sphere of what we of sphere 11 have any real cognizance. So the spirit that was telling us was on sphere 11. He was a professional, right? He was versed in the creation. And it's interesting because even these people aren't sure of everything that's above them. We are not yet capable of assimilating instruction of what obtains in those spheres superior to the 14th. So we say that inasmuch as we know the Christ to be omnipresent in that sphere, needs must he personally be of a sphere at least one level beyond. For there is no might of all the circumstances of that sphere where he is not found in presence. This is level 15. If he then contain that sphere in whole within himself must also be produced beyond. This is the 2 sevens and the 1. That is so far as we are able to reach in our reasoning on what instructions we have been given. So we say that in the manner of reckoning, the sphere of the Christ is the sphere 15, which includes within itself all those 14 spheres inferior. This much we say, and yet refrain from definition of the sphere 15, either as to its bounds or conditions, for them we know not. But whatever bounds be set, if set they be, it is from sphere 15 that power and authority are given to those who rule in the spheres below. So the hierarchy circling the earth is set. All spheres underneath sphere 15 are child spheres. All are owned and directed by the parent sphere, sphere 15. What is not known is whether the 15th sphere surrounds the earth, or if it's another different plane entirely. Does it rest above all the other types of heaven, of countless numbers of other planets in our universe, so multiple heavens may be commanded? If one interpolates the existence of support groups for each planet, which are responsible for that globe's health and destiny, then a higher level of control is required for multiple groups of planets, solar systems, and galaxies. At some point, the false sense of physical placement must be abandoned, and a central control of each orb of influence must be established. Because let me tell you, so when we talk about, the dark abyss below the earth, the lower zone above the first sphere of heaven, we're the spirits, and then the different levels of heaven, like concentric circles. The spirits are really giving us something that we can understand. I believe that all of this is really in storage, right? It's all mathematical. It's all logical. It's all like a matrix, and therefore there's data and relationships between data which really aren't a geometric set. But to our minds, it's easier for them to talk to us about so we can visualize the levels of heaven. So it may be that from sphere 15, Christ could command the planet Earth or another planet that resides in a faraway galaxy just by diverting his attention to whatever sublevel of heaven he so desires. While we on Earth see vast distances from sphere 15, each grouping is just a logical node on an inverted tree, spreading its branches from the trunk on high down to the various collections of control, ending in the rings of heaven for each planet. So, now, I wanted to give everyone the larger picture first. Now, this is what the beauty of Reverend G. Vale Owen is, because he talked to spirits as he went, higher and higher levels and more complexity. So now let's go back to heaven. And in one of his first messages that he got, and this is in the book, the compilation of 4 books, The Life Beyond the Veil, which in the book 1 of his, The Lowlands of Heaven. It was written in the early 1900s, or at least the messages were in the early 1900s, during the sequence of sittings receiving messages from his mother. So this is one of the first set of messages he had. He was able to document where his mother was living. And Vale Owen asked his mother to describe where she lived and worked in the spirit world. So now I'm changing gears on you, and I'm taking you all the way from this complete logical umbrella, right, sphere 15, now down to what most of us would see as one of the first levels of heaven. So I'm going to take you now back up. So what Vale Owen's mother said, it is beautifully appointed within and without. Within are baths and a music room and apparatus to aid us in registering our work. Is a very large place. I call it a house, but it's really a series of houses, each house allocated to a certain class of work, and each progressive as a series. We pass from one to another as we learn all we can from any particular house. So, as revealed by the doctrine of Spiritism, brought to us by Allan Kardec, right, in the 1850s, when we leave this life, it is not for an eternity of idleness. We continue to work, otherwise our boredom would be hell. Owen's mother talks about an apparatus to help in their work. According to Spiritist writings by Francisco C. Xavier, the first level of heaven in the spirit world is 50 to 100 years advanced in technology than we are on Earth. So hence, I surmise she's describing some sort of computer terminal, since she certainly did not use the word typewriter in her prose. These devices are also mentioned in Chico's books, dictated by the Spirit Andre Luis in No Solar, published in 1944. Then she writes about the outside. The grounds are very extensive. All have a kind of relation to the buildings, a kind of responsiveness. For instance, the trees are true trees and grow as much as trees do on Earth, but they have They have a kind of responsiveness to the buildings, and different kinds of trees respond more to one house than to others, and help the effect and work for which that particular house was raised. So it is with the grouping of trees in the groves and the streams and the falls which are found in different parts of the grounds. All of these things have been thought out with marvelous wisdom, and the effect produced is very beautiful. Again, the beauty of the grounds and the ability of foliage to glow is also recorded in much of the other spiritist literature. Everything in celestial levels of the spirit realm is a mirror on earth, but more perfect, more complete, and more in tune with the harmony and vibrations of those around it. Next, Owen's mother tells us of the power of the spirits. For we are told numerous times that while we live on earth, we must learn to control our emotions and attempt to live in a balance between spirituality and materialism. We must strive to maintain our love for all. And the reason for this emphasis on our inner thoughts is the power of the will in the spirit world. Read her explanation of how the houses are built. The atmosphere is also, this is what she's saying, the atmosphere is also naturally affected by vegetation and by buildings. For, let me repeat, those houses have not been raised merely mechanically, but the outcome, growth, if you will, of the action of the will of those high in rank of these realms, of so a very powerful creative wills. Let that sink in. This is beyond any fantasy books I'm sure that most of us have read. As you go higher, this is why we're on earth. To learn to control our minds. Because would you have a creative will with that much power if it ever thought of doing harm? You would want that powerful person to only think of doing good in helping and serving others. This is why we're here, everyone. We're here to learn to control ourselves, our character, our personality, to improve that. So it's not only the processing of raw materials coupled with the labor of workers that a house is constructed in the spirit zone, but with the mind of a high spirit who gathers by the force of their resolve, using divine laws to accumulate material from the ether of the universe, called universal fluid, to form the edifices. Owen's mother also goes on to recount how the colors of their clothes is governed by the combination of the surrounding atmosphere and each individual's spiritual quality. Therefore, as people walk around the gardens, their garments will change color. The main theme is that the spirit world is full of life, from flora to fauna, all in astonishing harmony. It is the perfection that we can only dream of while encased in our physical bodies while on earth. So again, I'm going through what we have learned from Vale Owen in Heaven and Below, Book 1 of Spiritism, the Spirit World Revealed to an Anglican Vicar. Just out, it's on Amazon. You can also go to my blog site. I have it here, is nwspiritism.com, nwspiritism.com. You can see it on the right-hand side, all my books that I have published. You can click on those. You can get it in Amazon Kindle, or you can get it in paperback. You can also get these I reference a lot of other spiritist books in my books. I have a huge bibliography of other books by spiritist writers, Chico Xavier, all sorts, a lot of Brazilian mediums. And I recommend, as you read this book, if something interests you from that, look in the bibliography, see what book it is. You can find those books usually on Amazon or on my blog site, nwspiritism.com. You can click up on the top right. There's a picture of Allan Kardec. You click on his picture, and it will take you to the EDI-CEI bookstore, and you can find just a wonderful group of spiritist books by Chico Xavier, Divaldo Franco, Yvonne Pereira. You can find all that. And I recommend it opens up a whole new world, a complete whole new world for you. So now, Vale Owen's mother is in heaven, right? Now, many of us think when we go and we think here on earth, we go, well, I don't really understand. God must be all powerful. I don't really understand him. And we have a picture in our minds of God, like an image of a Zeus-like entity, right? Overseeing the heavens. And Christians may see Jesus at his side, reigning over the multitudes of the celestial empire. And other religions see other, groups of fantastic beings, right? Hinduism and Buddhism as for different levels. And so there's this concept that, that when we pass over, we should be able to then understand God better. Well, interestingly, in G. Vale Owen's book, is his mother tells him about life and work in the first level of heaven. But then she speaks about the presence of God. And this is very revealing. She says, not everyone who comes over here is able to understand that one of the elementary truths which is necessary to assimilate in order to progress is that God is no more visibly present here than he is in the earth life. How interesting. They expect to see him bodily and are much disappointed when they are told that that is a quite mistaken idea of the way of his dealings with us. His life and beauty are quite apparent on earth to those who can look deeper than the externals of nature. And so it is here with this modification that life here is more tangible and easier to lay hold of and used by those who study its nature, and it pulsates all around us. And we, being in a more sensitive state, are more able to feel it than when we were in the earth life. Now, that's a marvelous description of heaven, is that you feel you're connected. And Spiritism tells us everything is connected. Now, spirituality, other groups have said the same thing. And yet Spiritism really kind of starts telling us how things are connected. What does that mean, being connected? So much more is revealed. And here she's saying they feel God because they can see the processes and the actions and the set of divine laws of God. They still don't see God, though. They can only interpolate, just like we do on earth. We can see the beautiful earth. We see what's happening. It's harder for us to interpolate, though, because we're told in our culture that, everything's just a random set of material, natural laws that happen through chaotic forces. Well, that's not true. There are a lot of laws, and they do, and it's good for us to research them, but everything is really backed and guided by the hand of God and the spirits that represent his will. So, hence, we feel the magic and we sense a connection with the universe, and we experience the unseen hand of superior planes guiding our path. When we return to the other side, the reality that thought is action is undeniable when witnessed firsthand when you are in the spirit world, when you're in heaven. Therefore, by the obvious fact of the divine law, spirits know there must be a divine intelligence. This doesn't mean that the grand displays of spirituality never occur. G. Vale Owen's mother tells us that upon certain occasions, manifestation of divine presence are given to us. She speaks of a time when a vast number of spirits were called. People who originated from different counties, creeds, and religions, all together in a vast tract of open country, and this is one of the first levels of heaven. Included was a group who had just finished their trek in the lower zone, helping unfortunate souls reach the first level of heaven. And the crowd gathered there, waiting expectantly, when they noticed a bright light in the sky, and the apparition coalesced in the vision of the cross, with Jesus in the middle of the stem, while angels filled out the rest of the lines. And from a vertical line, a column appeared, headed for the crowd. They hovered about a multitude and sang a hymn. The crowd at first was silent, but then began to sing with them. And then Vale Owen's mother tells him the rest. Let me tell you what she said. As we sang, there arose between us and the mountain a mist of bluish tint, which had a very curious effect. It seemed to act like a telescopic lens and brought the vision of him nearer until we could see the expression on his face. It also acted similarly in the forms of those who stood just below him. But we had no eyes for them only for his gracious face and form. Now he's talking about Christ. I cannot describe the expression. It was a blend of things which words can only tell in small part. There were blended love and pity and joy and majesty, and I felt that life was a very sacred thing when it held him and us in one bond. I think others felt something like this too, but we did not speak to one another, all our attention being taken up with the sight of him. So what G. Vale Owen's mother experienced aptly illustrates the power of Christ to radiate love and to permeate every fiber of our being with his shining presence. And seeing his effect on others in the spirit world shows how much he must have moved the populace during his times of earth. In the book Memoirs of a Suicide, a spirit who was one of his previous lives was one of the little children welcomed by Jesus when he said, "Let the little children come to me because the kingdom of heaven is theirs." This tells us exactly what really happened during Jesus' sermons. The spirit's name, who's witnessed the scene 2,000 years ago, is called Annabelle. And he's introduced with the following interesting piece of information. So Annabelle says that when the Lord preached his gentle doctrine of love, marvelously precise, elucidating images appeared unexpectedly before the eyes of the listeners of goodwill, enlightening them in an unmistakable manner and imprinting never to be forgotten illustrations of the folds of their being. This is why the great envoy, preaching in unshakable serenity, could hold the attention of famished multitudes for hours on end and control turbulent mobs, enrapture listeners, and convince hearts that would either prostrate themselves fearful in days when he passed by, or adhere faithful and enchanted to his doctrine. The impious, however, those whose rebellious minds were in discord with the divine vibrations, perceived nothing. So what am I saying here? I'm saying that when people, spirits on earth, when they saw Christ, knew that there had to be something behind all that power. And they had to infer the power of God from the power of Christ. And that even when Jesus came to earth, people still had that power to put images in people's mind. This is why this humble carpenter was remembered and made such an effect, right, for 2,000 years. This is why these fantastic stories are out, because he was such a high spirit when he came to earth, because that spirit, higher spirits, when they're born, they can control, they affect the fetus, they affect the person, the physical body that they inhabit for that short time on earth, as we do too. Of course, we as being more primitive spirits don't realize we have that effect. But as you go higher and higher, you have more and more. So small wonder that here, Jesus, a humble carpenter, without riches, armies, or mind, bent on a violent overthrow, could have been so effective and remembered after such a short stay with us. While on earth, people could see the presence of God through Jesus. It is the same in the celestial sphere. Again, I want to repeat myself. They see the presence of God through Jesus. Spirits detect the hand of God through the majesty and love of Christ. So, now, let's talk more about the levels of heaven. So, in reading spiritual literature, it's fascinating to read about the tools they use. And these change each different level. In the Reverend G. Vale Owen's book, his mother also mentions, and remember I told you they're 50 to 100 years ahead, they mention cell phones. And now the book, Life Beyond the Veil, was published in 1920. But this is what she said. In the mountains, there are other colleges, all linked up with those we saw by means of a kind of wireless telephony, right? And a cooperative work is continually going on. Wireless telephones. Interesting. The book was published again, as I said, 1920. Telephones, while improved and patented by Alexander Graham Bell in 1876, didn't really enter wide usage until the 20th century, right? In 1920, an operator had to be notified and your call manually placed. My own mother tells of a time when she and her friend, she was an operator in Fullerton, California. And, someone called, right? And you had to stick a little, thing in another, I forgot what they call it, a plug, another bracket, another plug in order to connect that call. There's none of this computer stuff, right? So I wonder what people thought when they read this book, wireless telephony, right? Now we immediately understand the term. We immediately know, cell phone. In the book No Solar, published in 1944, Andre Luis, the spirit author, who wrote about his time in the celestial city of No Solar above Rio de Janeiro, talks about large televisions. And Francisco C. Xavier, in other books, in A Conversation with Spirits, also mentioned what he called, translated Portuguese, right, personal communication devices. Again, another word for cell phones. And that, he brought that out as he said that was being used in the lower levels of heavens in the 1930s. So again, these are different spirits, different writers, right? Here you have Chico Xavier, born in 1910, about the time Jiva Owen was communicating with spirits. He was only 10 years old when the book came out from Jiva Owen. He didn't know English. He taught himself a little bit later on in life, but not, when he did No Solar. He didn't read Jiva Owen. And yet he came with the same thing. This is the greatness of all of the spiritualist literature. And this is why I believe the spirits put him in where I found Jiva Owen when my wife read the book Voltaire, which was a book written in Portuguese, has not yet been translated. I think it should be translated any time. And on the last page of that book, they had a party of in the spirit world of all these spirits who've been helping Spiritism. And the name on that list, Jiva Owen. That's how I found Jiva Owen. And that book was given to my wife by one of the directors of the Spiritist Center, Sierra Fraterna, in Rio de Janeiro. All these things connect. These are all synchronicities, right? This is the spirit world leads us from one thing to the next. This is why if you're awake and you look for the signs and signals from the spirit realm, you can't imagine what you're going to find out. And I talk a lot about this in my book, The 7 Tenets of Spiritism, how they affect our daily life. And it's more of my personal journey of how I found Spiritism and how at first I had no idea these things were happening to me. And I was just like, random events, until I learned that life is predetermined and that we are here on earth to learn. It's frightening, and yet it's a wonderful discovery. It fills in so much that we didn't know before. It explains why bad things happen to good people and good things happen to really bad people. It explains everything. It explains that our past life, right? Karma is real. We go through hardships because of what we did, what we have done before. That person may be a perfectly good person on earth in this life, but now they have to learn something. They have to mold something into their character. Trials we go through because we need to have a broad range. Karma is not an explanation for everything that happens in our life. The spirit world wants us to be well-rounded, educated professionals, right? As I've told you before, because we're going to be doing some very exciting things. This is where Spiritism opens up this whole universe for you. It explains all this. It explains what's going on. And this is something else I want to bring to people. And I think this is an important subject to talk about. And we talk about children and what happens when children die. And I want to make sure that you understand is that children are loved just so much in the spirit world. And in fact, we are told in spiritist literature that a spirit enters a body almost at the same time that a sperm fertilizes the egg. And we tend to think that a stillborn child, well, a tragedy for the parents, as an attempt at life gone wrong, right? There's something wrong, right? And a failure for some biological reason, where the soul of the little one finds a new home at some other future date. And while I have read about children who have died, some very young, moments after birth, being raised in the spirit world, in other spiritist literature, I have not read anything about stillborn children in any other spiritist books that I've read. And not all children must be raised in the spirit world. So I want to make sure this is only those requiring a renewal, a time to learn with the openness and innocence of a child. Whereas other children, after they pass on, they may revert to their mature spirit form. It all depends on that that person, right? So it may just be a higher spirit, right, or a regular spirit who's perfectly normal, right, having a quick childhood as a mission or a quick trial, right, for some specific purpose. So therefore, I read with interest when the mother of Reverend G. Vale Owen, in the Lowlands of Heaven section, discovers children in a palace being raised with love and care by the mistress of the house. And Vale Owen's mother is puzzled at first, since she's used to seeing children gathered together in a more controlled environment, like a school, right? In a school with loving teachers and faculties built to care for children, because they have schools and they have education facilities. In fact, there's actually a great book about a teen who wrote a whole book about his experience in heaven. Again, talking about Chico Xavier. Wonderful book to bring to your teen. You can find on the EDICEI bookstore the one where the picture of Allan Kardec. Click on him, you'll find that book. So she asked the mother of the palace. She goes, "Who are these beautiful children?" And this is what Chivao's mother told us. She explained that these are stillborn children who had never breathed the atmosphere of earth. For this reason, they were of different character from others who had been born alive, even from those who had only lived a few minutes. They also required different treatment and were able to much sooner imbibe the knowledge of these spheres. So they were sent to homes such as this and were trained until they progressed in mind and stature to such a degree that they were able to begin their new course of knowledge. Then, strong in heavenly purity and wisdom, they were taken in hand by those teachers who were in touch with earth itself and were taught what they had not been able to learn before. So Vale Owen's mother thought back to her own stillborn child when she was on earth. And suddenly, she knew the reason she was sent to this place, right? Her emotion got the better of her, and she sat down underneath the tree and let their feelings rush through her. Because nothing happens by chance in the spirit world. And almost nothing happens by chance on the earthly plane either. This is what it's hard to grasp, but it's true. She sat beneath the tree and let her feelings rush through her. And then the mistress of the palace came and sat down beside her, and she put her arms around Vale Owen's mother and said, "Dear, I am also a mother of one such as you will find here, all your own. So I know what is in your heart at this moment, for I've experienced your present joy also." Then Vale Owen's mother describes what happened next. "Then I raised my eyes to her face and saw the question I could not ask her. And taking my hand, she raised me, and with her arm around my shoulders still, she led me towards a grove where we heard children playing, their happy shouts and laughter coming through the trees. For I was very faint from all that great joy that filled me, and how should sustain the greater joy to come?" So she was going to meet her stillborn child. Reunions such as these I've read over and over again in Spiritist literature. From Henri Louis's journey to lower zones, where he met his beloved grandfather, to other worldly souls meeting wives, husbands, and long-lost friends. The spirit world arranges wonderful gifts to those who are deserving. The spirit realm above our earth, led by our Savior Jesus Christ, the governor of our planet and other planets besides, is above all merciful and loving. We on earth are only able to detect a small portion of that love that covers the multiple spheres of spiritual and physical life which rotate around us. And the price to gain entrance into the miraculous levels of our spirit world is straightforward. We only have to follow our conscience and spread love wherever we are able. So these are the type of things. There is no life that's not there. There's no life that's not presented in heaven. So believe this, we are immortal souls. We are immortal. And this is where heaven becomes completely real, right? So this is where I can't tell you enough how much better understanding heaven and Spiritism makes you feel. Now, let's talk about another person, not G. Vale Owen's mother, but another spirit that talked to G. Vale Owen. The spirit name was Castrel. In Castrel, he talks about an outpost, right? He talks about a place in the lower levels of heaven. And also, these type of outposts are also described in the books Memoirs of Suicide by Yvonne Pierre. And so when Jesus told us that his mansion has many rooms, the true meaning is there are many levels of heaven as well as stages below. As one progresses and learns, a spirit is able to ascend level after level, becoming less dense and more energy, a brighter aura, which denotes the purity of the spiritual being. And they begin walking. They begin by walking, then decided to fly. And this is how spirits begins. And Vale Owen's mother tells them that she and a group of 4 women begin a journey to a city, a great city in the midst of mountains. In the middle of the city would be a large golden dome. They're excited to go there. So they walked, and then they fly. It was volatilization. In the books by Chico Xavier, they call it volatilization, which is you move by thought. There's no speed limit. There's no speed of light limit in the spirit world. You move as fast as you think. So they arrive, and they say and this is what they say. They say, we sighted the city and descended before the principal gateway, by which we entered the main thoroughfare. It ran straight through the city. So I'm describing, she's talking about a whole city in heaven. And emerged through another gateway on the other side. On each side of this broad street, there were large houses, our palaces and spacious grounds, the residences of the principal officials of that district, of which the city itself was the capital. As we came towards the city, we had seen people working in the fields and also many buildings, evidently not residences, but erected for some other useful purpose. So this is another thing. You'll see the same thing over and over again about heaven. It's almost like it's a Renaissance medieval fair with these 1800, 1700 beautiful castles, and yet everything is clean and beautiful, and the animals are clean and beautiful, and the people are all wonderful. And because I believe that's kind of what the spirit world, in heaven, people create, and groups of people are with affinity in heaven. They create what feels best, right? And I think this is what is the most pleasant to ourselves. So they said each building had a typical garden to match it in color and design. And we passed on waiting for some sign as to our destination and mission. For on such occasion as this, a message is always sent on ahead, so that the visitors are expected. When we had gone some way, we entered a large square where beautiful trees grew on lawns, and the greenest of green grass and fountains played a harmony together. That is to say, there were perhaps a dozen fountains, and each had a tone of its own, and each was composed of many smaller jets of water, each being a note. At some times, there were a large number of people assembled in the square or park, as I might call it, both of the citizens and also those who dwell outside amongst the hills and pastures. But when we came to the fountain, it was just playing a simple series of chords in perfect harmony with the most pleasing effect. So as many people have said before, earth is heaven made perfect, right? Heaven is earth made perfect. I had that reversed. And one see glimpses of the flawlessness of heaven, such as the Taj Mahal or just a small railway station tucked away in some minor corner with vegetation that matches the quaintness of the building. And these are just like, they just feel good. You feel connected to them. It's not like this function follows form type architecture garbage that we see here, with these impersonal glass buildings. These are columns and arches and beauty. And we've all noticed and long before what we see to be the utterly alluring calmness and completeness of excellent architecture and ambience. And as children, we gaze upon the false cartoon world, right? And imagine ourselves part of the landscape, living amongst brilliant colors and comfortable houses in the land of compassion with the desire for all of us. This is what heaven is. It is more than a product of our imagination. It is real, and with exertion and effort, we shall arrive there someday. So the group decided to wait in the square for who would come to them about their new assignment. They didn't have to wait long, and a man came up to them. He was very tall, about 7½ feet, and he dressed in a cream-colored tunic and had a gold headband with 3 large blue stones around his waist. He wore a belt of pinkish silver. The women knew he was a high spirit because of the glow emanating from his body. I've talked about that before. His spirits are high because of the reflection of love. So the higher spirit, the more love reflects from their body. He led them to a large building shaped like a Greek temple, with high arches, and on top of it was a golden dome that could be seen throughout the city and the countryside. Whereupon he told them, "This is my home, that is my city home, but I also have other houses out there in the country parks where I go from time to time to visit my friends whose duties lies in those districts. Come within and you shall be given the welcome which is your due. You have come so far to see us." So as I'm telling you this, these are great descriptions of heaven. They're meeting Castrol, right? He says how houses are made, right? Tells how children are taken and cared for. And now they're in the city and they meet the leader of the city and they talk about what the city looks like. These are glimpses of heaven, all brought to us by spirits to the Reverend G. Vale Owen. And the other aspect of the perfection of heaven are the people who govern. Whereas in our world, the normal world is the more powerful, the more arrogant and demanding. And as humans rise up in the corporate or government ladder, they believe themselves to be smarter and more special than the masses below. They expect to be served. In the spirit realm, it is as it should be. Leaders are meant to serve and assist those who are in need. I have read accounts of the kindness and humbleness of the souls in charge who have been placed in positions of great responsibility, also possess great kindness and understanding and a willingness to help their fellow spirits. So then, Castrol leaves the group to relax the chamber, whereupon a woman comes to them to explain why they were chosen. This is what she told them. "You will wonder why you have come here. And what is the city and place in which you have been sent? The house in which you know is the palace of Castrol." Well, that's the spirit that first met them. "As no doubt you already know, he is the ruler of this wide district where many occupations are followed and many studies are pursued." So again, we work and we study in heaven. "I hear you've already been to the colony of music and farther on to other settlements." Now I'll tell you right now, I talk about the different levels of education in my second book, Spirits and the Spirit Universe, where I talk about the College of Music, the College of Light. These are all revelations brought to us by the Reverend G. Vale Owen. So now we are in touch with all of these and are constantly receiving their reports as to progress in this or that branch. This is what the women are telling the group of people that was with Reverend G. Vale Owen's mother. These are considered and dealt with by Castrol and his officers from the harmony point of view, as I will call it. Coordination, however, would express what I mean. For instance, a report will arrive from the College of Music, and another from that of Light, and another from the settlement where the creative faculty is studied, and from other branches of service. These are all very carefully examined and analyzed and tabulated, and when necessity requires, the results are tested here. You have seen some of these as you approach. They are scattered all over the country at great distance. They're not quite so complete in detail, those of you have visited elsewhere, but when any new apparatus is required, a mission is dispatched to inquire as to its construction, and those return and erect it in the spot most fitting in relation to the other establishments. So this is an organization. This is different colleges with different scientific research centers, all connected to a hub that says, okay, you've saw this. Okay, now we're going to verify it. We're going to see how it fits into everything else we're doing. And so what they want to do is show these women all what's going on. So by that explanation, one can decipher much about the spirit world. First, G. Vale Owen's mother was part of a group. So in the future, she could communicate what she saw to her son. The spirit world had put this plan in motion years back, even to the birth of his mother. Plans span decades, centuries, and eons. Secondly, heaven is one of labor, whether in pursuit of knowledge, working to maintain a city, educating the populace, or building grand palaces. The motion of life is constant. Heaven isn't a life of leisure, but a continuation of life on earth. While earth is a poor reflection, the general facts of daily life are still true. We work, we learn, we play, we are entertained, we have responsibilities, we report to some and others report to us, all mundane routines we all know so well. The large variation in heaven is that the environment and the people. Whereas we live with neighbors and coworkers who may have no compassion for us, in heaven, people love each other and strive for kindness and fraternity. Imagine living in a world where you are genuinely happy to see and talk with all your fellow citizens and are certain they mean you no harm. Thirdly, each sphere, each stage of heaven circling the earth contributes to the greater good, as can be derived from the colleges and faculties mentioned. The higher ranges of the spirit world allows each area to create new devices and processes which can be a benefit to their level and those below them, thereby helping the advancement of Earth society and technology. When spirits are reincarnated back on Earth, they bring with them memories of new inventions. That's how everything's been. So they had cell phones. Cell phones were then invented, right? 50 years later, right? They were shown on the Star Trek. Remember the Star Trek series? They had these little communicators. Well, they became real. The imaginations were all passed as people like Gene Roddenberry and the writers, right? They reincarnated. They saw those things. Then their imagination went back to those. The spirit world's always foreshadowing what's coming. Now, the question is, why are there new inventions? After all, isn't the spirit realm led by God, who is omnipotent? There shouldn't be anything left to create. And I believe, and I have only my own insight to go on here, is that there are two main reasons why products are researched and produced. God has set us up to improve ourselves by our own free will. Our sphere, under the directions of Jesus, allows us to acquire knowledge of each level, and then, only if we so desire, advance to the next stage, where more wonders exist. To present us with all knowledge and devices immediately would doom us to a life of mere existence. Next, so therefore, they're letting us learn, right? We can learn and we can create what's going to help. Each planet probably has its own type of humans with its small variations of environmental factors, culture, and other unique limitations. So hence devices must be developed and introduced which fit into our puzzle, into our distinctive characteristics. So to facilitate our spiritual growth, even when we pass over the spirit world, we emerge from our dense bodies and foggy minds into an environment which we can comprehend. And therefore, G. Owen's mother talks about the first levels of heaven. She says, things here when we first arrive are certainly different than those of the old life, but not so different as to make us feel dumbfounded by their strangeness. So that's why, it's like you're not just taken to this completely alien land. You're slowly brought up and educated to this wonderful world, to this world of thought by force of will. So hence we are treated as on earth. Children are sent to school, highly supervised and regulated. We are subject to the same care. In the spirit world, we aren't tossed into this grand intellectual oneness that some postulate is the ultimate nirvana. But we are ready for a destination that is entirely foreign to us step by step, never exceeding what our minds may comprehend and never forcing us to advance until we express our desire and dedication to earn the right to peer into the next level. So I hope this has been good for people tonight, talking about heaven. And I'm going to go on more and more talking about heaven and go through what the Reverend G. Vale Owen's mother and other spirits have presented to us. So again, make sure you come here every Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific, all the time zones in between. I'm live streaming on Facebook under the Spiritism and the Spirit World Around Us Facebook site. Let me write that down here because I think that's important. That you should come here and actually write comments and let Facebook group. Spiritism and the Spirit World Around Us. You can also, go to my site, my blog, NW Spiritism, and there'll be a link that you can join the group. Just please come. It's an open group, so you can find it. I would love to have you there. Contribute to Spiritism, contribute to us. Also, we're on Kardec Radio, which is, you can download Kardec Radio on your iPhone or Android phone. Go to the PlayStation or the application store. Just look up Kardec Radio, Kardec. You will get Spiritist programs 24 hours a day. So there's a lot of literature, there's a lot of information out there for those who are interested in Spiritism, those who are interested in knowing why they're here on Earth, how you can improve your life, and how you can be much calmer and stress-free by Spiritism. So I want to thank everyone who's been part of this program tonight. I want to wish everybody just the greatest time. And now I'll put our end credits. I would like to thank everyone for listening to our program on Kardec Radio, and to point you in the direction to find more information about the spirit world around us. You can visit my blog at www.nwspiritism.com. Again, that is www.nw as in Northwest Spiritism.com. And if you're ever in the Northwest, I certainly would welcome to have you come to our meeting on Bainbridge Island near Seattle in the state of Washington. Many blessings to all of you, and please continue to explore Spiritism and the spirit world around us.